is the fourth installment of our conversation about new birth and regeneration, God's ability to give us a new start. And I don't know about you, but I've been blessed tremendously by the Word of God. It's given me life, and I hope that it's been doing the same for you. If you'll let me just kind of review for a moment. In the first instance, we talked about how new birth gives us access to God and the things of God. God gives us new life so that we'll have access to Him. Secondly, we talked about how new birth teaches us that if we are willing to let the old life die, then God will give us new life. Remember the seed. If we let the seed has to die in order to produce good fruit. And then last week we talked about how God uses new life to compel us, to push us forward in our lives. In other words, you can't be born again and stay the same way that you were. Not only so, this new life, as we learned last week, with new life, God teaches us to build on what we already know. Don't throw away what you have, but learn how to leverage what you have. Leverage what you have in order to build on what God has given unto you. So today, if you will, remember the umbrella, the overall title of this series is New Birth. But if you need a subtitle, today we're going to talk about anytime, anywhere. He is the God of anytime and anywhere. Turn me down just a little bit, please, just a little bit. He is the God of any time, perfect. He is the God of any time and anywhere. I am afraid, sisters and brothers, that there is an erroneous philosophy that is running rampant through the church that's really hindering and handicapping the people of God. We who are of the blood-bought band have somehow bought into the notion or the idea that God needs perfect conditions in order to bless us, in order to move us forward, in order to make us producers of good fruit. We have bought into the idea that we have to be at the right place at the right time, that God has to make us perfect in order to use us. But God sent me here. I am on an assignment to remind some of us, but certainly to inform others, that God does not need perfect conditions. In fact, I would suggest to you that He is God no matter where we find ourselves and no matter what we are doing. I would tell you today, dear heart, that the God that we serve does not need us to be perfect, nor does He need us to be in a sterile environment in order to bless us in ways that only God can. Fact of the matter is, if God waited until we had ourselves together, if God waited until we were at the right place and at the right time, we would never be blessed, would never move. If waited for us to get ourselves together, we would find God with His hands metaphorically tied, never ever able to be God, the God that He wants to be in our lives. But I ought to have one or two in the house who are holy enough to testify in the house that when God blessed me, God had to bless me because I couldn't bless myself. When God blessed me, my life was really jacked up. I ought to have one or two in God's house today who are willing to testify that when God saved me, I wasn't sitting on a mourner's bench. When God saved me, there was no choir loft. When God saved me, I didn't have a preacher near me with a microphone talking about good news, but I was on my back. When God saved me, I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. When God saved me, I was in a world of trouble. When God saved me, I didn't have a dime to my name or a friend on my side, but God stepped in the nick. Am I preaching to the right crowd? God does not need perfect conditions. Fact of the matter is, if you really think about it, sisters and brothers, as it relates to our relationship with God, He is dealing with marred vessels from the start. Okay, y'all not feeling that? Let me just say it like we used to say it in Valley Park. Ain't now one of us perfect. He's dealing with marred vessels from the jump, right? Yeah, I know you in here with your Sunday go to meeting clothes on, but look under your clothes and you'll see some cracks. Look under the persona that you're trying to make us believe today. You'll see some scars trying to make us believe you've been holy all your life. Let us open your closet and let's see what falls out. God does not need us to be perfect, nor does he need perfect conditions. I know that we think that just because we are within what the deacon used to pray, the 4 consecrated walls of the church, that we think this is a sterile environment. Lord, help us. Lord, help us, because there's more dirt in here right now than there is on the corner of 38 and Kane. See, don't fool with me today. I had a little rest. There's more dirt in here right now. If we allow people to start telling their stories, you would blow your neighbor's mind with what has been going on in your life. If they really knew from whence you'd come, if they really knew what you used to do, you know, they just been hearing your little cute testimony. But if they know like God knows, God does not need a perfect environment. Fact of the matter is, the Lord sent me here today to let somebody know that he is moving right now with our imperfect selves in this non-sterile environment that we call the church. I thank God that he does not wait for perfection in order to move. Check it. I brought you all that way because the truth of the matter is, when we meet Ezekiel and the children of God, the people of Judah, they are in a jacked up situation. I know that this is a prophecy about restoration and liberation. I know that God, while the prophet is situated among the people who are in exile in Babylon, sends a strange message talking about how he's going to make them strong again. God sends a strange message about how he's going to put them in a land that gives them enough room to move and to be the men and women that he called them to be. But if you look at where they were and what they were going through, this looks like a strange word. Just like I know when some of you are considering what you're dealing with in your life right now, and here is the preacher talking about good news from God, you think this is a strange time for God to be talking about blessing you when you consider all that's happening in your life, how you just trying to make it through the next moment so you can make it through the next hour, so you can make it through the next day. And here is preacher talking about God is going to make you strong again. It seems like a strange message, but God sent me here to tell somebody that even though you may not be at the place that you want to be, and you may not be all that you think you ought to be, God wants me to know that he can do what he needs to do, and he can do it anytime or anywhere. Check out the children of God. They are in Babylon. You remember Psalms number 137. It says that they are in Babylon, sitting by the river. Their harps are hung on the branches of the willow trees. Their captors, their enemies are taunting them, talking about, why don't you sing us some of those songs of Zion? They're trying their best to remember home, trying to remember Jerusalem, talking about, if I forget Jerusalem, I hope that my hand uses its cunning or its ability to perform. I hope that my tongue cleaves to the roof of my mouth. They are in a bad situation, and here comes Ezekiel. Ezekiel is among the captors. Ezekiel didn't ride in his Bentley. Ezekiel is among among the captors. Ezekiel didn't step out in his $1,500 suit with his gator shoes. Ezekiel is among the captors, and God's Spirit moved and picked Ezekiel up in the Spirit, put him in a valley, and said, I want you to tell the people of God that restoration is on the way. I may as well tell you, baby, that's my assignment today, is to let somebody know, I don't care how jacked up it is, God is pulling it back together. I don't care how bad it looks, you can look beyond where you are right now, because God is going to cause new birth, regeneration, new life, revival, refreshment, whatever you want to call it. Just believe that God is going to do it. Are we still together? So here is Ezekiel, and the book says that he is in the Spirit. In the words of John, he's in the Spirit, and God takes him to a valley of dry, where he sees a multitude of dry bones. Now I need to tell you, let me stick a pin right there, because I know where I am and I know what I'm saying. I may as well tell you right now so that we can take this journey together. I ain't connecting no bones to no bones today. Ain't no hip bone connected to no leg bone. And no, ain't none of that happening today. Come on and walk with me. Are we still together? Check it, look at it. He is in, the book says that in the Spirit, the prophet with his anointed self is in a valley. Now I need to tell you, sisters and brothers, that I just believe that some of us in the Lord's house today, even though Easter is on its way soon, we will look at, we will spend time at the cross, the crucifixion, the lynching in the first century, and go on to the celebration of Easter. Some of us in this place right now know something about valley type experiences. Some of us in here today, we may not have articulated it that way, but the truth of the matter is we have spent some time sojourning in the valley. I would suggest to you that the issue, Brother Rembert, is not the valley itself. It is not the position of the people that causes the issue. It's the of the bones that causes the issue. It is not the position, but it is the condition that causes the issue. The book says that when Ezekiel is in the valley, he sees a multitude of dry bones. Well, if there are bones, it suggests that one day, sometime, perhaps in the near past or the far past, these bones had life attached to them. These bones were a part of someone's life, made up the skeleton, if you will, of somebody that moved around, that interacted with people, that was involved in community. But now that person, that existence now only remains as bones. I bring the matter to your attention because it lets us know that in every valley, dry bone type situation, there is a history attached. Nobody goes to the valley, remains there long enough to become dry bones without having a history. There is something, we are not sure, but there's something that brought those humans, those people to that valley. We don't know if it was war. We don't know if, as some believe, that this was a people who was cursed and the curse said that they would not have a proper burial. I don't know what brought them there. All I know is there's a history attached. I brought you that way because I wanted you to know, sisters and brothers, that every one of us, we have reached this point not because we just fell out of some sort of black hole or we exist in a vacuum, but there's history attached to us. And I want you to know that God is so much God that he even uses our history to take us to the places he wants us to be. I told you the situation is not positional, it is conditional, because the truth of the matter is you're in your history and in your right now, you ought to know that every one of us will have to experience a valley at some time in our lives. I don't care how holy you are. I don't care how much Bible you know. I don't care to whom you are connected. I don't care how many followers you have on Instagram. If you keep on living, baby, you're going to face a valley type situation in your life. You don't believe me? Let me go on and jump in your Kool-Aid so I can tell you your flavor. We will all deal with some valley type situations. Some of us know something about dealing with the valley of despair, where you are like Gladys Knight and got to find a good reason to keep on keeping on. Somebody knows something about dealing with the valley of desperation, where you feel like you just have to do what you gotta do to make it through the day. And church people have the audacity to try to judge you when all you trying to do is make it through the next day. Some of us know about the valley of discontentment. You know that valley type experience when I don't care what you do, you can't find satisfaction. You can't find the right food. You can't put on the right clothes. Nobody knows what to say. You can't find nothing on television. You're mad at the world. You're kicking the dog. You don't want nobody to speak to you. Don't look at me. Don't touch me. Don't sit next to me. Can't find satisfaction nowhere. Everybody knows something about living in the valley. I told you the situation is conditional and not about position, because we will all face the valley. Problem is, they stayed in the valley long enough to find themselves existing as dry bones. Let me help you. You will have to go to a valley. But be sure to know that David's words were right. God's intention is for you to go through and don't stay in the valley. I need to say that for you again. God never intended for you to build a house in the valley. You might have to put up a tent, but don't build a house. God never intended for you to spend so much time in the valley that you forget what it's like to live on the mountaintop. Boy, I'm preaching today. I'm afraid that many of us want to blame the valley for our problems. But God never intended for you to stay in the valley type situation. You're not supposed to be blaming the valley, baby, because many of us are still in the valley of our own volition. It's not anybody's fault. You just stopped trying. I knew it was going to get quiet right there. But I'm going to say this today. You're going to go home with the truth whether you want it or not. Nobody did you anything. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. You just want to feel sorry for yourself. And then you get angry when nobody else wants to feel sorry for you. Nobody told you to stay in that position. If it's a jacked up position, then get yourself up and get yourself out. If you don't like it, the only one who can change it is you. God told me to tell you He heard your prayer. He's waiting for you to move. Here's the problem with the valley. Reverend James has to help me with this one. Carter G. Woodson said that when your mind remains at a low state, then you never develop into the person that you're supposed to be. If you stay in the valley and your thinking stays in the valley, you will never imagine what it's like to live on the other side of the valley. I think I'm preaching to some people right now that you need to just lift up the way you think. always thinking low. And I know my grandma is making the English teachers among us cover their heads, their ears today. But if you think low, baby, you're going to live low. You better hear me today. If you think low, then your living will be low. That's why Jesus asked the rhetorical question, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? Low thinking leads to low living, and low living leads to a low existence, and low existence will lead to a low eternity. I don't know about you. I may go to the valley, but if I die in the valley. Y'all pray for your boy. The problem with the valley, in a real sense, is if you stay there too long, the result is dry bones. Come on and walk a little bit further with me. The dry bones, sisters and brothers, tell us at least three things. On the one hand, the dry bones, as I just said, let us know that somebody decided to stay in the valley when they did not have to. Secondly, dry bones let us know that somebody has chosen to forget who they are and whose they are. Can I tell you today, and forgive me, but there are too many who still think we Negroes back in the 50s and 60s who want to stay in the valley of shucking and jiving. That's the best way I can say it. Always showing me your teeth. Never serious about anything. Always wondering what somebody else thinks about you. Want to ask somebody else's permission to be blessed. It says that you are existing as dry bones because you refuse to acknowledge who you are, a child of the King, and whose you are. And the result, the consequences, and check the text if you don't believe me, the result of the consequences is that you become separated. It says that the bones were not only dry, but they were scattered. That's why there's so many of us today. When you check what's happening in our lives, we're one way today and we're another way tomorrow. Can't get it together. Right? And it's not because of what's happening in our lives, it's because we've been in the valley too long. Can I keep going? The worst part, or the most specific part of the dry bone experience is that it means that we have been separated from God. So not only are we separate in our human existence, but it means that we no longer have the Spirit of God, because the Spirit of God is described as wind and water. I don't know where you live or what you've seen, but everywhere I see wind and water, it's not dry. I'm going to say that for you again. Everywhere I see wind and water, it's not dry. Can I flip the script on you and tell you that everywhere you see the Spirit, it's not dry, it's not lifeless, it's not hopeless, but it is alive. Can I tell you, baby, that you can go to church, you can put your envelope in the basket, you can serve in your ministry, and do it all without the Spirit of God in your life. Boy, I better help somebody in this house today. You can go along and think everything is all right, but if you don't have the Spirit of God at work in your life, you live without power. You live without your power source. You live without the ability to make it through. And so that's why every time the wind blows, you feel like your life is falling apart. That's why every time something goes wrong in your life, you feel like you're not going to make it. It's because you've been existing, but you don't have God's Spirit in your life. I keep trying to tell you, you can have as much God as you want. And I am afraid that some of us are stuck at the empty tomb, and we have never allowed God's Spirit to have His way in our lives. And we sit there trying to look sedity. And I don't know how you can be from the country and be sedity. Trying to look sedity, talking about don't take all of that. Baby, you ain't been through the right storm yet.